When you start to feel like things should have been better this year, remember the mountains and valleys that got you here. They are not accidents, and those moments weren't in vain. You are not the same. You have grown and you are growing. You are breathing, you are living. You are wrapped in endless, boundless grace. And things will get better. There is more to you than yesterday.
Hi, I'm Derek Mills. Welcome to the Glo Podcast. Lisa joins me in a conversation with Morgan Harper Nichols, an incredibly talented artist, poet, and musician. This is a very lovely conversation, and I'm pretty confident it will make your heart glow. We talk about the power of storytelling to generate empathy, on how empathy breathes space and wisdom into the sometimes harsh realities of the world, on how empathy expressed can help excavate our past to strengthen our connections with each other in the present. In a vulnerable and beautiful conversation, Morgan shares how certain childhood experiences influence her art. She reads some of her poetry and sings an a cappella version of her song, Tell the Story. You'll hear how she finds beauty in many things, on how nature can teach us, open us to creative permission and wonder. I hope you enjoy our conversation.
Well, hi, everyone. Morgan Harper Nichols is here with us today. Hi, Morgan.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, Morgan.
Hello.
We're grateful for the opportunity to spend time with you today. So thank you for being here with us. We greatly appreciate you and your work. For those of you not familiar with Morgan, she is an artist, poet, and musician. Her work is inspired by stories, conversations, and everyday. In 2017, she invited people around the world to share their triumphs, stories, and struggles anonymously through her website. And she drew inspiration from these stories to create lyrical letters and illustrations with an emphasis on love, community, and support. Morgan, when you are expressing through your art, your words, illustrations, your songs, your energy comes through. It truly feels genuine and direct from the heart. Like your soul is speaking to the hearts and souls of those interacting with your art. It feels like with each piece of art you put out into the world, you are giving the heart of humanity a hug. Like an alchemist taking experiences of suffering and weaving in the gifts of bravery, hope, unity, resiliency, ultimately transforming fear into love. So I appreciate your heart and your sincerity and your willingness to be vulnerable. Cry. Your deep level of empathy and compassion. It's welcoming and allows others to feel safe being vulnerable. And I think people can recognize themselves in you and in what you express. So to sum all that up, I feel like you find the beauty and gifts from the struggle and bring them to life, or sometimes just holding space and grace for moments when it's hard to find the gifts and the good. You say that you see art making as a way to connect with others, to stay curious, and to grow empathy. And I feel that.
Well, thank you. I think I'm just taking in what you said. So thank you for that. In real time, it's sometimes hard to feel as though it's connecting always, in the way that it does in the long run. So it just means a lot to hear what is my hope that people do connect on a meaningful way. Like it just means a lot to hear that reflected back to me. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. So
That is my hope.
soak up all the goodness, all the love.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're putting it out. It's coming right back to you. Well, let's dive into some questions.
Yeah, so as Lisa and I were preparing for this, we were considering a variety of ways of starting off with you. And you've done so many great interviews where you share your story and your background, but so much of your new book is about an aspect of your childhood. And so I thought we would just start from the beginning. And, in one of your poems in your new book titled How Far You Have Come, Musings on Beauty and Courage, you note, when you encounter any glimpse of childhood, let it in. And towards the beginning of your book, you share we have to train ourselves to look for light and hope, no matter if we're moving at our preferred pace or not. And that by the age of 6, you'd mentioned that that lesson or those lessons, were well on their way to seeping in for you. And but you're also at the same time very clear that it's not just an inward journey. You also say that to reflect on our lives, we must look outside of ourselves. And as I mentioned, parts of your childhood permeate your whole book. And so I'm wondering, can you share what it was about your childhood and your character that helped form the early foundation of, for your art as it is today, and how you see the world?
Yes, that's such a good question. I had a lot of time to use my imagination as a kid. I have one sibling and we were homeschooled. So I actually spent a lot of time, my everyday life was a lot of there wasn't a lot of interaction with a lot of other kids, especially when I was much younger. So for me, it was okay, if life's gonna be interesting, I've gotta use my imagination. So, I wrote a lot of stories as a young kid. I don't know why, but I was really intrigued by I think the book I've never talked about this before, but I think the book Madeline had a lot of influence on me, like, this concept of this little girl going to this school. So, a lot of my stories were set in England for some reason, and they were, like, little children, oftentimes orphan children, and my mom told me later, she was like, "Yeah, I was a little concerned, like, why are all of your characters orphans?" But when I look back on that, I even though I did have both my parents there, I think a lot of it was just, like, this little kid who may feel alone in the world, and I think that that's a lot of what I felt like because, my parents were also pastors, and the church environment was it was a small church in a very big community, and a lot of the people that came to the church were a lot of kids that would just kind of walk in off the street, and there was just so much diversity there, but at the same time I didn't really always feel like I had a lot of friends my age because even the kids that I were around, they a lot of times they were coming without their parents, like they were just kind of coming in. So I really struggled with feeling alone a lot. And I found a friend in having an imagination. I would just come up with stories. I still vividly remember dreams from as I was a kid, and they still impact my creativity today. So it was a huge yeah, it was just very twofold. It was a struggle, but at the same time it opened up the door to make up friends. I had very I spent a lot of time on imaginary friends. Oh goodness. I mean, they had first, last, middle names, backstories. I mean, it was elaborate. So yeah, I say all that to say because when I see what I'm doing today, I'm like, I don't know if what I'm doing is that different. Because unfortunately, like I that theme of feeling alone, that's something that I have felt a lot in my life. And it has been through writing and putting things into words and making art that I've been able to find connection. So yeah, that's a big theme in my childhood and it's in the book too. That's kind of the first time that I really kind of let loose and decided to talk about these things. And I definitely approached it thinking, I don't know how much people are going to connect with this, but I hope that it connects with at least some part of other people's childhood that was something, or just when you were younger, something that you just want to hold on to. So yeah.
That's
And you had
great.
so much support from your mother, it sounds like, to create every
Yeah.
day.
Yes, and the older I've gotten, the more I see that as very pivotal that both of my parents were super encouraging to my sister and I to use our imaginations and be creative because I love to help other people just express themselves, whether it's just through journaling or whatever. And it breaks my heart the amount of times I've heard from people that says, "No, I was actively discouraged from being creative or writing, or I was literally told, "Don't do that, like, that's bad," and that breaks my heart. So I definitely, know for a fact that having that at a young age, being encouraged at a young age has definitely had a huge impact on it for sure.
I wonder, I was just thinking more about empathy in those tender young ages when we're really starting to gain awareness from curiosity. And so if we could dive a little bit into your new book, How Far You've Come. So you do share, some of your childhood, and I think it's beautiful, and I think a lot of people can relate to what you say about feeling alone. Even with all the love and support around you, there are certainly those moments where you just feel alone in the world. But there are a couple pivotal moments in your book when, at a young age, you really seem to start to gain awareness and feel empathy and compassion, particularly for people that you've never met before. And these moments brought me to tears in your book reading this. You write about the impact of seeing a small picture of slaves in an encyclopedia. So there was particularly a little Black girl about your age at the time, and you seem to start wondering what life may have been like for her. And I wonder if you wouldn't mind just reflecting on that moment for you. And I'd love to read a passage, if it's okay with you, from the book on that as well. But maybe just hear from you first, just about that experience of seeing this picture, as you mentioned, just sort of off to the side in the bottom, blurry, and how that maybe influenced sort of the beginning of really starting to feel what others might have gone through that you've never really have known before.
Mhm. Yes, I feel like with a vivid imagination, which I definitely had as a kid, also comes curiosity and just like an eagerness to learn, which I feel like in some way, lots of kids have that. A lot of kids are, when we're younger, we're just like, well, why is this way? Or, why do people do this or do that? So I was definitely asking a lot of those questions about everything. When I was younger, my parents said that I was always asking a lot of questions. And I used to just pick up encyclopedias and history books and just flip through and just try to put the pieces together, even though I couldn't fully understand or read all of the words. And there was an image of a little Black girl who was a slave that just she was a part of a group photo with other slaves, and it was just something so striking about seeing a slave my age, around my age, that just filled me with so much, on one hand, just anger that that was her story, and also just this that I think only could have come up this way as a child, this sort of hopeful imagination of like, well, what if her life had been better? Like, or what if it ended in a different way? So I used to just kind of make up stories in my mind. And I think it kind of even sort of connects with the whole thing I was saying about, orphan children, of just like this child who had big questions and was seeing things that no child should have to live through. I was I was like, I don't know. I just feel compelled to at least imagine something better
Mm,
for that child, even though I physically can't do anything about it. I can't go back in time and change it.
mm,
So I would say even today, my imagination is very fueled by that. And when I was getting ready to when I was writing this book, I was thinking of significant moments that I've had in all of the different states and landscapes that I write about in the book. And that one, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I was like, I don't even know if this is a story because it doesn't end with anything that I can say declaratively. And then I found the girl, and this is what happened. No, it doesn't end with that. I don't
right.
know. She was nameless. However, that story to me is just such a reminder of the importance of imagination, because we encounter these stories where we don't get to know what happened. We don't get to see how it ends. And the best we can do is just imagine a future where stories like that have better endings, to
Hmm.
imagine better endings. I think that's really important, and, of course, I wouldn't have used that language as a child, but I
Sure.
think that that's where I was headed. I was headed in that direction, I didn't know it, but, yeah.
Well, you went right to her, I feel like right to the heart of her and just, like, enveloped her in love, and if it's okay, I'll just read just a passage from this part. Um, "I wanna write stories to change her history," referring to this girl. "What stories might she have written had she been allowed to write? What discoveries might she have made if her travels were not solely an escape at night? I think of the unmarked white pages of the journal she might have, and the black ink that she would put on that page with eloquence and grace. Maybe she would build her own encyclopedia of stories, worthy a beautiful black binding. I will never know who she really was, but I believe in her power to speak."
Mm, yeah,
So beautiful. And
thank you.
thank you for sharing that story with us now and in the book. And for anyone listening, you're going to have your heartstrings pulled. It's just gorgeous reading this book. I also seemed that the exercise of going to the experience rather of going to New Orleans after Katrina, and even there, even though it was I think you mentioned 3 years after the initial storm came through, seeing the devastation and what that experience was like and how that potentially shaped, like, what was it like for these folks when the storm was actually coming through? What were the immediate days after, like, for these folks and for the children in particular? I
Yes,
wonder if you could just reflect on that experience for a moment.
yes, I was very grieved by everything that happened in New Orleans with the hurricane, and feeling very similar when I did go, of just wanting a better ending for something that already ended in tragedy. And that's just such a weird place to be, because it's, when you encounter death and you encounter like those big final moments like that, you're just like, oh, because is there something I could have done? And I think that, and I was experiencing all those emotions, as a college student. And, in contrast to the Mississippi story, by that point, I'm a bit more cynical, if you will. I'm a bit more trying to piece it together intellectually, rationally, and just getting frustrated by running to dead ends, even with that. Um, and I think it's interesting because I feel like what I felt there, like, I felt that many other times in my life, but it was just very clear because I was alone. I was kind of separate from my other friends on the trip, and I was just kind of forced to just sit with those feelings. Like, there it wasn't a setting where I could talk to locals or I could interact with people. And it was just a moment, for whatever reason, where I think I was kind of just alone with my own thoughts and alone with my own frustration for not being able to do more.
Hmm.
So, it's even interesting talking about it now, because it's like, wow, okay, yep, I have felt that way again and again many years after that sophomore in college moment.
Hmm.
So, yeah, and I even think that that's what kept me writing these stories and wanting to share these stories, because they're very hard to write, because I don't share a ton of my personal life, and that hasn't been something that I've done in a while. But one
Mm.
thing that did keep me going, even just through that story, was, especially considering everything we've gone through as humans over the past year, it's just that emotion, that feeling of, I don't know what to do, I don't know what I can do. I think that that's something that is timeless, and isn't bound to an age. I mean, we all kind of circle back to that feeling for different for different reasons, whether it's on a global scale, a national scale, or even just interpersonally. So, yeah, I feel like that's the emotion of that story as well, of just learning how to tackle that feeling of I don't know what to do as
Mhm.
someone who's growing up.
Mhm. And I feel like, and that's kind of why I said exercise, like, you're starting to exercise this empathy muscle, if you will. Like, you're just starting to gain more awareness by practicing curiosity. You're starting to take it in and feeling it in the heart and just imagining what life may have been. And then from that, the imagination, again, as you said, starts to kick in and you imagine all these stories. And then that even imagining can even crack your heart open even more, right? And then it just
Yeah,
keeps flowing from there and onward.
absolutely. I think that the more you said the word awareness, which I really like, because I think the more you become aware of things, empathy starts to kind of naturally arise.
Mm.
And you may not even like I never necessarily called myself like, "Oh, I'm empathetic." Like that wasn't necessarily something that I gave to myself. It was other people saying, "You seem to have a lot of empathy." And I'm like, "What do you mean? Like, what are you talking about?" Like, I feel like I'm the most cynical person like there is. Like I think about way too many things. I'm like, "Well, but that's exactly it." It's like I become aware of all of this stuff. And then once you get down to the bottom of it, you start to see the humanity and you start to see people for who they are, and that's where empathy kind of ignites. So yeah, I think I definitely didn't realize I was practicing empathy in that
Mhm.
moment. I was just frustrated at the outcome of this hurricane, and but it's like that is sort of like the basis of entering into empathy.
Yes, it seemed to all have served you well to be doing the work you're doing today in the world. So it's beautiful.
Thank you.
I wonder if this might be a good time, if you're open to it, Morgan, to share your poem for the one who came before me.
Yes, for the one who came before me. Without photographs or birth certificates or wedding photos to commemorate her life, I will hold her in my memory. I will make room for her struggle, her strength, her story. Perhaps this is the gift of creating, the ability to make space for songs unsung and memories untold. Creating allows a new narrative to unfold beyond words, beyond records. Empathy meets imagination, looking back, bursting into compassion, a different kind of history, her story. How can I bring her with me?
Sorry. Thank
Yeah.
you for sharing that. Uh, and I
Thank
was listening
you.
with my eyes closed, so I was really taking it in, I think, even deeper. But
Mm,
it's so beautiful. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, we can just let that one breathe for a while. We have the digital copy of your book, so we're looking forward to having the print
Oh,
version, to buying it when it's out, so we can see
oh, thank
all
you.
the
Yes, I
beautiful
can't
art.
wait for you to have it as well.
You mentioned a moment ago dead ends, and that makes me think of a moment in your book. It's and you also mentioned the timeless human condition experiences, and this story is one of those where you share how the MBA applications are piling up on your desk. And at some point in that chapter or passage, you reflect on, you know what, it's time to grow up. And, a few paragraphs later, you speak to how you could not escape yourself, you couldn't escape your flaws. And it was around that time where you posted the Remember the Mountains and Valleys That Brought You Here poem. And what I love so much about this part of your story is there's a paradox there. Like paradoxically, like part of the work of growing up for you was to actually choose a path that would allow you, or that was you following your duty, not someone else's duty. And you write specifically, I believe we have a duty to connect, a duty to share, a duty to create in our calling, whatever that might be. And what I'm curious, while I'm reading that, I was curious, how is your sense of what it means to grow up? or to be in this continuous process of always growing up evolved since you posted that first poem?
Mm. The first word that comes up, honestly, is surrender. I had to surrender to the fact that, okay, yes, on one hand, you have this sort of rational game plan, this approach of like, oh, if you can't find a job, now it's time to go back to school. Like, if you can't, if things aren't working out, then look for another job. Those are all very practical, rational things, and there's nothing inherently wrong with them. And at the same time, there's this whole other there's this whole other path that you can't really predict, and it's not really all up to you, which is terrifying. I mean, I'm an artist, but I also like love a good schedule and a good, okay, I'd like to know what we're going to be doing for for the next few months or years.
Yeah.
I I like that. However, we just don't get that for everything. It's really tough. So for me, I feel like that moment was coming to a crossroads of accepting that. It's like, yes, you went to school. Yes, you gave your all in the music industry. Yes, you did all these things. And at the same time, you're just going to have to let go and see what happens. So that was me learning that. And I feel like I'm still learning that. It's very hard because it's while I do love like I have an online shop, I have an app, I have all these things, like while I do love that, I also do crave consistency and stability and all those things, which once you kind of start your own thing, that just becomes scarier. You know, it's scarier and a lot more of, just thinking day to day of like, there's no like other person who like sends me a check in the mail like every 2 months and it's like, here's your salary. It's like, no, I'm involved in that. Like it's just a lot of work. So yeah, I feel like it's interesting too, because I'm like, that book, I didn't even think about this with the book, like, because that happens kind of in the middle when I'm living in Texas. And I
Hmm.
was literally
Hmm.
me coming to the middle ground of realizing, okay, yes, there is this structure and this path that you've taken because you're like, that's what you do to be responsible. But then it's like, you're literally going to go west and it's just going to be a pretty wild experience and you're just going to have to go with it. So, yeah. Yeah, I hope that answered the question because I'm like, that's something I feel like I'm still figuring out in real time.
Yeah, definitely. I think, per part of what Lisa was saying earlier is like part of what you grant is permission to be constantly growing up and to be constantly
Mm,
engaged in that process of excavating what no longer serves or excavating what is unseen
yeah.
so that we can grow, learn, build.
I
Absolutely.
love that. It's so true. And I feel like growing up, or at least healthy growing up, is embracing both.
Yeah.
It's embracing, yes, we've learned so much, we have our experiences, and at the same time, it's like we're all still don't know what we're doing. Like it's both, it's like we know what we're doing, but we don't know what we're doing. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And, I'm thinking just now as we're talking, so much in your writing, the concepts of the in between moments, the liminal moments, like the cracks in the rock, the union spots where parts of nature meet other parts of nature, these connections between people. Like you're inviting us to constantly be aware of and be considering, how our bodies are meeting the world and interacting with the world, and to constantly uncover and be curious about the ways that we can grow, and that's a moment to moment experience. I'm guessing that because our world needs so much of that right now, that's part of why your work is resonating with so many people. I,
Mhm.
I don't have a question there, it's more of an observation.
Yeah, it's well, thank you for that observation. I am very interested in what connects us and and also the connection of between, like you said, kind of like between humans and nature, and nature and nature. And that's something that, especially over the past year, while I was working on this book, I was craving more and more. I was not traveling like I used to and kind of missing like one of my favorite moments. I'm just like the classic cliche window seat grabber. I'm that person on the plane. Like I want to sit by the window. I want to watch all the clouds go by. I want to watch any little bit of sunset or sunrise I can get. I crave those moments. I'm a very visual memory. I have a memory of being on a plane at sunrise, and the pilot was saying over the thing, they were like, "Everyone, go look at the sunrise. Like it doesn't always look this way. Like, look, 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 look." And I still remember just because of this very visual memory. I remember turning around. I was sitting toward the front, and I remember turning around and seeing everybody like lifting up their windows, like all look out. And it's just like when when would all of us with all these different backgrounds, all these different stories, all these different itineraries be looking in the same direction at something like this? And it's like, I don't know, I just love moments like that. And I just feel like we, especially these days, we don't have them as much. We don't have moments of like, okay, at least we all have this together. At least we all can connect in this present moment, even if it's just a flicker in time that most people may not even remember. I think all that matters. So that's why, like, when I was writing this book, I kind of really leaned into, okay, what are the physical landscapes that I've been on and what have they taught me? And the cool thing about that is like, wow, millions, billions of other people have been on these exact same landscapes. Like the experience that I have looking at the Sandia Mountains in New Mexico, how many other people have seen these mountains? How many other people have encountered this? So yeah, that's why I don't know, I don't get tired of talking about it because I feel like the possibilities are really endless around what connects us, which it doesn't feel that way when you look on the internet, but it's there.
Right. Those moments where we are collectively, spontaneously celebrating and being in a moment of awe together around something that's not tied to a specific belief system or a particular dogma. Yeah, I can see why that was very special for you.
The poet laureate of Arizona where I live, I think I don't know if he's currently, but Albert Rios, he has a poem where he says in there, that like the sky, I'm paraphrasing, but he says the sky has no borders. And I just love that because it's like, yeah, humans, we're really good at putting up our borders. This is mine, this is yours, stay away. But it's like, yeah, the sky is still like this one space where you look up and it goes on and on and on. It has no borders. And I love that. Obviously it's as we grow up, it's kind of harder to hold on to those things. So
Mm.
yeah, I just love thinking about that.
No, those are important reminders. And yeah, even looking up at the moon at night, like who's on the other side of the
Oh,
world looking at
yes.
this moon as well right now? And what are they thinking and
Yes.
what are they dealing with in their life? And yeah, that's beautiful. I think maybe this is a good moment to dive into the Mountains and Valley poem that Derek was just referring to, because
Yeah.
it seems like this was a pivotal moment for you as well. Um, when through this poem, because correct me if I'm wrong, but this was the first poem that you had actually put your name next to before releasing it out into the world. Is that right?
Yes, I had been at different points writing different things, sharing different things, but attaching my name to it was a challenge for me. And for whatever reason, with this poem, it was a kind of a last minute decision to write my name on it.
Like a little scribbled afterthought, like here you
Yes,
go,
it
and
really
out into the
was
world it
because
goes. Yeah.
yes, yes, because if you look at the original image, I didn't even write it directly underneath the end of the poem, which is what you would do if you're writing a poem line by line. I just kind of wrote it off to the side in all lowercase letters. It was definitely an afterthought. I barely, barely, barely did it. But yeah, I did.
Well, that poem, I think, proved to have great significance. It sounds like, and we weren't when you put it out into the ethers, so to speak. It took a journey and a life of its own. Um,
Yes, all on its
it's,
own.
it seemed to have an impact that you weren't expecting. And I wonder if you could share just a moment about that.
Yeah, so I wrote this poem and it was kind of a I feel like this is such a cliche joke, but I think it's just such a but it's true. I really do think it was like the millennial in me that was like, okay, you wrote it, like take a picture of it, like like make it a moment. So I did it. I don't know. I'm just like, I'm in my 20s with an iPhone. That's just kind of what happens. You take pictures of everything. So I took a picture of it and I got ready to share it on Instagram. And then at the last second, I was like, I don't know if I want to share it there. Too many people I know are over there. This is a little bit more vulnerable than I usually am because the poem is about kind of feeling like a failure and feeling like I had put so much into being an artist and I had let everyone down. That's how I felt. And I wasn't ready to share that with everyone. So I put it on Pinterest because at the time I was just using Pinterest personally and kind of passively. I didn't have like, I wasn't actively engaged there. So I shared it on Pinterest and that was in November of 2016. And it was in January of 2017 that I ended up finding out that it had been repinned over 100,000 times. And I found out because it started to show up on Instagram. Other people were sharing it, and people that I knew were saying, "Hey, there's this poem that I saw on someone's page, and your name was on it. Did you write that poem?" And I was like, "Oh, well, I guess it's out there now." So yeah, I still don't know. I still do not know. Like I remember Pinterest used to have where you could kind of see like, all the people who had shared it. I could not never figured out how it took off, quote unquote, or what happened there.
Oh, I think that's cool though. That's part of the mystery and magic to it all.
Yeah, it's part of and I'm glad that I had that moment, and since then I've had other moments like that where to me it is that surrender thing. It's like, wow, you really could give your absolute best to something and it could totally flop. Or you could barely put something out there and that ends up being the thing that takes off. Like it is very humbling.
It's as if the collective consciousness or something, they really like people really needed to hear or read what you had to say in that moment because they're ultimately feeling something similar. And so to have that something to relate to coming from
It's
such a lovely, relatable person, coming from the heart. Would you mind reading the poem that we're referring to? The Mountains and Valleys poem?
yes, of course. When you start to feel like things should have been better this year, remember the mountains and valleys that got you here. They are not accidents, and those moments weren't in vain. You are not the same. You have grown and you are growing. You are breathing, you are living. You are wrapped in endless, boundless grace. And things will get better. There is more to you than yesterday.
See? A hug. A hug for humanity. It's so beautiful.
Mm,
Your
thank you.
voice too is like a hug, I have to say. It's like a big, warm, cozy hug, comforting, and it's lovely.
Well, thank you. I actually feel that way about both of you all's voices, just being
Oh
honest.
gosh.
Uh,
Seriously, I'm like, this is very calming. I appreciate it.
Wonderful.
yeah, I've been enjoying listening to your podcast because
Oh,
I tend to listen to podcasts right before I go to sleep and when I wake up when preparing for an interview. And your voice is, it's so lovely. It's good to actually fall asleep to for anyone looking
oh,
to use your podcast for another use you probably did not intend.
No, I actually did think about that with because lately I've been doing these episodes where I just read some poetry and a prose piece, and I've thought about I was like, I no, I personally I love to listen to I listen to a lot of, like, high energy people podcasts because I feel like I have very low energy, so I kinda have to turn on other voices who can kinda hype me up a bit, but I started thinking about it, I was like, "Oh, there's probably some people who may be looking for something to kind of help calm them down." So, that is kind of my approach. I'm like, "Yeah, this is just for those moments where you just kind of want to breathe there and you don't have to just can kind of let go in that moment." So yeah, that means a lot to hear. I say all that to say I am okay if you use my podcast to fall asleep. I'm totally okay with that.
Or to ground you at any moment of
Yes.
nervousness, etc. Morgan, do you feel your work is resonating with people right now more than ever as we're craving connection and feeling the pains of human suffering on deep levels? I feel like with every report of a shooting, racial injustice, learning about the health of our planet or the lack of the health of our planet, our individual hearts and collective heart just keeps breaking and cracking open more and more. I think it's important we call out those fears and honor the suffering in order to bring them to light and to heal.
I totally agree with that. It was interesting. This happened last year, but it feels like ages ago. But my last book, I had a book come out called All Along You're Blooming, which is poetry and art as well. It came out the very beginning of 2020, and I did something that authors are not supposed to do, and I went and read the reviews on Amazon, and one of the early reviews was a one-star review, and someone was saying, "I feel like this book just sounds like someone who sits at home all the time, and doesn't do anything, and everything is just going bad in their life." That was their review.
Mm.
And I was like, well, funny enough, a month later after they said that, that was when the lockdown started. And I just thought that was interesting because my mom has a chronic illness and she has spent a lot of time in lockdowns in her life, not being able to do things she used to be able to do, not having answers, not knowing when she was going to get help for things. And I've had other people in my life who just had things like that where it was just hands tied at home, and I think about those stories, one, because it's my mom who I'm close to, and also other people who've shared their stories with me. I think about people like that when I'm writing all the time. So, I think about people who have experienced the loss of loved ones, um, because of people that I've lost in my own life. So, I am very conscious of, I mean, for lack of better words, the worst case scenario when I'm writing all the time. Um, Being a Black person, I'm thinking about racial injustice all the time. I have a Black son and he's a toddler, but I think about his safety. And so for me, it's on one hand, there's a lot of maybe anxiousness and fear that comes with that, but it also makes me very aware that at any given moment when whether I'm writing something in my book or I'm sharing it on social media, that someone might be reading this after receiving the worst possible news, um, or the best possible news. Like it's both could be possible. So yeah, I feel like I've gotten a lot of feedback over the past year, but people saying, "Wow, like it seems like you were writing for this moment." And of course, I had no idea what was gonna happen, but I definitely do write about loss. I definitely do write for people who are maybe at home when they're not wanting to be at home and not able to do the things they want to do. So, yeah, I think about that a lot, and that is honestly something that I want to continue to write about even as we, hopefully are, reaching the end of this, hopefully. And I think about, you know, there might be a brief period where maybe not as many people are resonating with messages of slowing down because they're like, "Nope, I don't wanna slow down. I got places to be, things to go, things to do." But there are people who are still dealing with chronic illness who may not be able to go out, or there are people who may still have something, maybe they lost a loved one, and they're the person who has to go in and clean up the house. So it's not all, and get rid of things. It's not all just like, okay, everyone's gonna go out and have fun and make up for lost time. I do feel called in a sense to still write also for those people who may be entering uncertain seasons, even as this one big thing kind of changes. So I don't
Hmm.
know if that makes sense.
It does make sense, even for those that are in a season of adventure and life and travel. And none of us are immune to these life changing moments, whether it happens gradually or just smacks us in the face. Either way, the medicine that you offer is needed. And the good thing is it's out in the world, and your new book's coming out into the world. And so the tools are out there, and the messages are out there to bring comfort and hope. I'm just grateful for the gifts you're putting out into the world. This medicine is needed for
Well,
sure.
thank you. Well, thank you for saying that. And I, as you were talking about, the adventure side of things and those who are maybe in that place, it reminded me of something I shared late last year that I think was probably one of my most popular shared pieces last year, and it was fully grieve your losses and also fully full feel the full weight of your joys.
Mm.
And I think about that a lot of like, we're all gonna be experiencing some level of the joys and the sorrows, and there's absolutely room for all of that.
I wonder, maybe this is a good moment if you wouldn't mind touching on the recent diagnosis of autism and just what that journey has been like for you.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was diagnosed with autism almost 2 months ago, a few months ago, and I that came after a lot of going back and forth since childhood of my parents thinking that it could be a possibility that I was on the spectrum, but just back in the 90s and even just being a female and being a Black female, it was just very challenging. Lots of dismissal and, "Oh, no, there's nothing wrong with her, like, she's fine." And, yeah, I just sort of learned how to work my way through life, even with though I had a lot of challenges that and struggles that I didn't have a name for. Um, and feeling very alone, I learned how to kind of hide it all inside and just sort of put the responsibility on myself that it was up to me to fix all of this. And then when I was 27, I kind of reached a breaking point where I just felt like I felt like I was struggling with anxiety, but I was like, it feels like there's some other layer of something, but I don't really know what it is. So I started looking into, autism spectrum again, and I finally got the courage to ask my doctor if just my primary care doctor. I was like, I don't know if this is a possibility, but I would love to at least talk to someone about possibly being on the spectrum. And before I could barely get the words out of my mouth, he was just like, "Oh, there's nothing wrong with you. You're perfectly normal." And unfortunately, I took his word. And I just sort of said, "Oh, well, I guess it's on me to just fix whatever's wrong with me. And I'm clearly just not doing my part." And it wasn't until last year when I was on TikTok and videos showed up of women who were talking about their experience with being diagnosed with autism as adults. And I watched those videos and said to myself, these women are describing my whole life. Like this is me and I know it this time.
Mm.
So thankfully I got the courage to just Google once more and find a specialist in my area, and I was able to get an appointment, and that started a whole several month process of getting diagnosed. And it's just been, I mean, it was very challenging because, I mean, it was digging deep into, and this is probably why I could speak so much about my childhood, because I'm like, I just went through this whole thing of going through every little facet of my life. And yeah, it was very hard to go back and look at all of that, but at the same time, I can honestly see, I the after my the specialist read the diagnosis, and which was like the size of a textbook, I feel like it was a lot of things, a lot to take in that I'm still taking in. And she looked at me and said, "And it's not your fault."
Mm.
And that just, yeah, no one had ever said that to me before.
Mhm. And
So it
sort of
was
a
a
release.
weight lifted.
Yeah.
It was. I had gotten so used to just putting so much responsibility on myself of, "Oh, this is your fault. You need to fix it. You need to fix this, this, and that." And it's like, or there's a lot of other things going on, and you're just learning it for the first time, and there's so much grace to work through it. So that's what led me to wanting to share the because I wasn't sure I wasn't sure that I wanted to share the diagnosis at first, because
Mhm.
it's just so personal and so huge. But at the same time, it was like, if I can help someone else struggle a little less, and if I can help someone else find the courage to seek help, um, then it's worth it. So, yeah.
That's beautiful. I agree with you. If one person, can be impacted by you sharing your experience, then all the better for it. So
Mhm.
thank you for your bravery and sharing. I know I have a bit knowing of what that feels like just in sharing about my autoimmune stuff, and so I appreciate that. And I feel like, at least I get the sense that through the process of the diagnosis and what's to come, you're just going to serve your work that much more now. I don't know if you feel that.
Yes, I feel that way so much. There's a lot that I kind of hold back in talking about sometimes, because I have said, "Well, I don't know if other people will connect with this." Like, this is sort of like a weird thing. And one of those areas has just been what I've dealt with, socially and with communication. That's a pretty big part of what a lot of people on the spectrum deal with, is just not always picking up on social cues, and having a lot of challenges with like making friends and things like that. So I I did a poll once, like, on my Instagram story, asking, I was like, did and this is before a diagnosis, but I was like, "Did anybody struggle with making friends growing up?" And like 60% of people said, "Yes, I did." But I just kept thinking about that 40%. I'm like, "What did these people like, what is that? Like, you didn't struggle with this?" Like, I'm just so mystified. So there's a lot of times where I would even like, well, I don't want to say this because there's 40% of people who are clearly fine and don't struggle with making friends. But it's like, Morgan, 60% of people, that is not a small number. Talk about it. Talk about how awkward you have felt. And yeah, so even now I feel like I am writing more about, um 'cause I'm not saying they're not out there, but I read a lot, and I have not found that many books even on just talking about, like, the sheer awkwardness that so many people feel around, like, friendships and maintaining friendships with all of the texting and the emailing that we have. There's just so much, and I think I've spent so much time getting caught up on, like, the people that don't struggle with it, that it's like,
Mm.
okay, let's, even if other people, even if they're not autistic, like, there is something to that, and you can speak to that. You're allowed to talk about that. So, yeah, that's just one little area that I've just been diving into more, and I feel like I know that I'm kind of on to something, at least in terms of vulnerability because I'll start to kind of like squirm in my seat. And I'm like, oh, I don't know if I want to write this. Like this is like,
It seems
or,
like leaning into the gifts and the blessings
yeah.
from it, even though it doesn't always maybe feel like a gift and a blessing,
Oh, yeah.
but they're
Yeah.
there.
I just have to remind myself of it's like, remember when you were a freshman in college and you just felt like you were doing it all wrong? Yeah, right for her. That's who you're right
Mhm.
for. So, yeah.
Yeah, and you show that in your book a little bit.
Oh,
That's
yes,
powerful.
I
What
do.
was there a
Thanks.
specific poem that you wrote right after the diagnosis?
That's such a good
Yeah.
question. I didn't write for a very long time after actually. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think what was the first thing that I wrote?
It's
Now I'm
probably
really
a moment of, like,
curious.
integration of taking in the information and just, letting it sit with you for a second.
Yeah.
I wonder about the poem that ends with bringing courage to life and become who you were meant to be.
Oh, yes. Okay. Let your weakness be the wellspring of your wonder. Let the gaps between the rocks become spaces where you are free to bring courage to life and become who you were meant to be. Okay, now I know why it took me a second because that one, I feel like there are some poems that I write. There's sometimes, and this happens even with journaling. There's sometimes where I write where I feel like I'm kind of pacing my way into like or kinda like just pacing my way around some emotion, and I'm like, I'm kinda prancing around, I don't really know what I'm writing, and then there's some where it's like da 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 da, and I kinda go deep down into something. And this is one of those because so I think it kind of like it's like, oh yeah, that was kind of a deeper one that came from that because that bit about let the gaps between the rocks become the spaces where you are free is about that literal moment that I had at the Grand Canyon that I write about in the book of being a child, kind of encountering the Grand Canyon. And that moment was such a symbolic moment of freedom for me, and especially just creative freedom, creative permission, just I think it's literally because I feel like landscape itself can teach us and show us so much, and it's literally just that openness, that sort of broken openness to me that just gave me so much permission just as a little kid to just experience wonder. And that was super important because as a kid, I didn't have an official diagnosis back then, but I did struggle with some dyslexia and I'd struggled with reading and processing words and all these different things. And it was something about being at the Grand Canyon that just really I was able to experience something great without having to read, without having to, I mean, again, I had undiagnosed autism, I didn't know, but, like, without having to talk to other people and follow the social cues, because that's something that I was learning to do as a little girl, like, okay, you gotta learn how kids, like, make friends with each other, and you gotta learn how to, like, be a normal kid, um, and I was like, "None of that matters here." For some reason in this open space, I feel connected, I feel like I'm a part of something bigger than me, but I'm not having to do all the other little things that I have to do in regular everyday life.
And it seemed like that moment was this whole new relationship with colors. Like, first of all, I felt the melted crayons on your hand from the previous pack in the car. And
Yes.
then, but right after, like, can I go get this new box of crayons? After having witnessed all these amazing colors that you had never fully maybe had seen but not fully had taken in before or
Yeah.
seen in a different way this time, whatever it may have been. But it seemed, and I know there's a message, and you probably can reflect on it, but that the using color now became a way of expressing your words that you weren't maybe at the time able to articulate your feelings.
Yes, absolutely, and I think that color was a way that I could kind of take that moment with me, and it was a way that I could that moment of just feeling like I could just it's kinda hard to talk about, but here I am, like, filtering myself again, trying to tell myself,
Right.
"Stop filtering yourself, Morgan," because 'cause I'll do that, and I'm like, "Oh, because people probably won't understand." But the thing is and now I know with autism, is that one thing that I have struggled with, and I still struggle with is, it takes me a minute to be verbal, and I would my natural state would be to just kinda be in a place and just kind of what most people would just see as just staring, like, they would might just see, "Oh, she's just over there staring at a wall." But for me, that's I'm processing, I'm fully present, I just my natural state is not to start talking. I've learned to do that because I've learned that if you just stand there quietly, then you draw attention to yourself. So, I say all that to say that that experience of the Grand Canyon was I can just be here. I don't have to talk. I don't have to do anything. I can just be. And I think in my kid brain, crayons was the closest I could get to taking that with me, being able to just color. It's like I can just be. I don't have to socialize with these crayons, like, I could just use them and just see what happens, because I think, little young Morgan is like, yeah, she knew that she couldn't be in that space all day, but to have that as much as I could was just so important, and, yeah, of course, I wouldn't have used that language as a kid, but it definitely I'm so grateful that whatever those crayons gave me that has persisted in my life, and I have kept finding those moments as I've gotten older.
Yeah, and that landscape in particular has a very strong voice. Those rocks, the colors. There's an interesting combination of the melted crayons with some of that landscape appearing kind of melted and transforming almost before your eyes.
I'm so glad you picked up on that. Yeah, I that whole story it came the hardest and the easiest at the same time. It felt the most clear to me, I think. And I feel like I'm still learning from that moment of my life. I'm like, it was all those years ago, and I feel like every time I talk about it, I learned something new, which I just love that so much. That's really cool to me.
I love that too. I think that notion of looking back to an experience and taking it another layer, getting lessons from one layer and then actually excavating a little bit more like, hey, I'm going to hang out in this moment a little bit longer. There might be more there that I'm
Yeah.
not quite seeing in this moment. And then inevitably, oh, there's another layer.
Yes, I have these stories where well, I shouldn't even say stories, they're not stories yet. They're, like, just little glimpses from different moments of my life, and I don't know why they stand out to me. And so I'm just like, at some point, I'm gonna be able to get to that next layer and find out what it is, but, yeah, I think it's really fascinating, and I try to hold on to that because I think many other maybe artists or creatives or anyone who just wants to find meaning in life really deal with sometimes is maybe feeling like we haven't lived enough or done enough that's worth talking about or
Mm,
sharing. So I love the idea of being able to constantly look back at the same moments and learn more from them each time.
I love that. It's pretty. I
Yeah.
wonder if we could touch a bit on your singing, your
Yes.
singing and songwriting, because your voice is gorgeous.
Oh, thank you.
I resonate so much. I mean, some people, I feel like, everything has a vibration, and I just feel like your voice really resonates with me. I could just listen to you sing or speak for a long, long time, and it just sits very well with me and in my heart. Um, so I've come to know your music through your YouTube channel. So I hope folks explore your YouTube channel because there's a whole vision board of goodness and artwork and song, and you could just play around in your YouTube channel for hours. Um, so I wondered, well, I was going to ask if you could sing a song, see if you're interested in grabbing your guitar, but
I don't
I
even
will
know where it
say,
is. Is that bad?
no, it's not bad. But I will tell you a few
It's
of the
somewhere in
songs
this
that I
house.
just love.
Yeah, I would love to know.
Okay, Baby, It's That Simple. and see the good,
Mm.
which I love because you can't always see the good,
Yeah.
especially when struck with crisis.
Mhm.
And yeah, I could go on, but just in a general sense, it's often very hard to find the good. It
Mhm.
sometimes comes later as we look back and excavate, as we've said before. And that's where you sort of dig and you find the nuggets and the treasures and you can find the good.
Oh, yes. Mm.
And then tell the story.
Oh.
That song's just gorgeous.
Well,
But I want,
you know what? That
yeah,
one's a cappella,
yeah.
so
Oh, hello.
I could sing some of it.
That would be just
What?
a treat.
It's so funny, I'm like, I feel like I just put myself on the spot. I'm like, "Did I just volunteer? Did I why did I do?"
Only what you were comfortable
Yeah,
with. But
I totally can. So, here's the thing, I know that song, but I'm just gonna, pull it up
yeah.
just to give myself, um just to give myself a cushion, um, because, oh, okay, I got it.
Cool.
Okay,
Awesome.
so
Take it away whenever
yeah,
you're
you
ready.
you picked an acapella one, so there we
Yay.
go. Remember the path beneath your feet, the things you have lived through, the things you have seen. You've been through so much on this long, narrow road. Oh, what a blessing you don't travel alone. May you tell the story of the mountains you've climbed. May the wisdom you've gathered help others survive. May you tell the story of the mountains you've climbed. You're not alone out here with light as your guide. Oh, you are not alone. You are not alone. You are not alone.
Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ugh. I knew I should have brought a tissue box in here. I actually had the thought before we started, and I should have followed through on that. That's just beautiful. Um, so did I hear right? Have you been writing a song a day?
Yes, I quit a few weeks ago though.
But the having done this exercise, it sounds like, and from previous um, songwriting, that you have an album coming out. Yes.
Yes, I'm so glad you know that because I was
Yay!
Yes, so I said that I was gonna write a song a day a year with the intention of writing my way to an album because I haven't released an album in many years because I've been focusing on poetry and art. And I was really kind of bummed because my schedule was just getting pretty busy. And it was shortly after my diagnosis, I was just realizing that my day was just getting crazier and crazier, and I needed to kind of tone things down. So I was talking to my sister, who's also a music artist, and I was telling her, I was just like, oh, I don't want to quit. I really wanted to. And she said, Morgan, your intention was to write an album, and you did that like a few times over. So I think you're good, Morgan. So yes, I'm working on a new album now, and that gave me a piece to stop to stop the project. But yeah, it taught me a lot. It taught me the reason why I wanted to do it, and I had to do something that was kind of audacious, was because I had gotten to a place where music was for me something that I had started to associate with the music industry. And music is something that is ugh, I could go on and on about it. I mean, it is so much more than that. And so many people don't sing because they feel like they're not great vocalists. But it's like, no, what happens in the body
Mm.
is what it's about. It's not always about the melody. I'm like, singing is like ancestral. Like I could go on and on about it. Like there's so much there. So I just knew that I had to reconnect with that because I had made it all about kind of like, oh, making an album, which is great, but that's not all that music is. So Yeah, you didn't even ask me a question about that. I'm
Well,
sorry.
no, like I said, your voice is gorgeous. Is it weird to say I'm a little picky about voices? I don't, maybe some people are, some people aren't. I don't know.
I do think we have sensitivity to certain
Right?
audio,
Resonance
like,
and
oh, yeah,
yeah.
for sure. And especially too, because when you consider all of, like, the plugins and different ways that voices can be edited,
Mm,
there's some, like, frequencies that I have a hard time listening to. So, yeah, I think that's
okay.
a real thing.
Thank you for saying that. Yeah. So there's, I guess, a vibrational match, if you will, like
Mm,
the whatever vibration is coming from your soul up and through your throat chakra and out, through the heart and out of your mouth is I am feeling that in my cells.
mm.
And
Wow.
so this is why I'm excited, so excited that you took the time to dive into this exercise of a song a day and that the outcome was an album and potentially even, you know, more another album, who knows, because that sounds like a lot of songwriting, but um are there any release dates or when you might start recording, or is there anything to share?
Yes, we're looking for the summer. It's very interesting. Again, my sister gets credit for this. She was like, "There's so many summer themes in the songs." I was like,
Huh.
I don't even do that on purpose." So, she is a producer also, so she's actually helping me produce it, and so, yeah, we're looking for a late summer release, so, yeah, it'll be out soon.
Wonderful. I will be the first to sign up for that
Oh,
album.
thank you. I'm
You
excited.
wrote a song for your sister, is that right? That she sang for?
Yes, yes. So I've written for her and, one of her, singles I was a writer on and I got to be a part of it. So, yeah, I have, and I think that one's called Beautiful Day, and,
Wonderful.
but yeah, I've written some other songs with her, for her, and she's done the same. So, yeah, we have a lot of fun with that.
Oh, that's awesome. It's nice to have someone you love and care about that you can connect creatively in those
Oh,
ways. That's
yes.
beautiful. What were you going to say, Derek?
I just wanted to say that, Morgan, you're the pilot asking us to roll up our window shades.
Thank you. Wow, that you have no idea how much that resonates. Wow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Wow. I'm
Hold it
just
together.
I'm just thinking on it. I'm so sorry. I don't normally do that. I normally try to say something that
No, that's
really
perfect.
uh, yeah, that I feel like that just sums up, like, my whole hope. Wow.
Beautiful. That's beautiful.
Wow.
Well, Morgan, you offer so many tools and lessons that you've learned along the way. You share those beautifully with others. It's sort of a pay it forward. Everything it seems like you've taken in and that works for you in your creative process, you want to share and offer those to others. For instance, I did the word cloud exercise with you.
Oh,
I found that really helpful. So I look forward to diving in more. But so most of those, from what I see, are offered via YouTube and obviously via your podcast. Is that right?
yes, yes. I try to make things available in different formats for different learners. So, yes, pretty much, on my YouTube channel, you can find some I I use the word tutorials just to categorize them, but don't be intimidated by them. Like, if you're just a curious person looking for a creative exercise, like, it's, something I hope you can find. And I also do share some shorter versions, creative exercises on Instagram as well. Um, I try to, like, make it very easy for people to, like, find their way into different creative practices, so, yeah, and then on my podcast as well, yeah, I do different, series and different prompts. Right now on my podcast, I've been doing, journal prompts, like, at the end of every episode, so it's either something you can journal about or just carry with you throughout the day. I love questions, so I love to offer questions, and yeah.
That's great. I think there's a lot of, sort of bite-sized podcast episodes there where you can dive in for 15, 20 minutes and there's so many great takeaways. So that's a beautiful offering. And then I also have your app Storyteller, which is really lovely. When those come in, it's just brightens my day. So thank you for another beautiful way to experience your offerings.
Well, thank you. Yeah, that's a project that I'm really passionate about because I feel like many people, we have these devices. Most of us have smartphones, tablets, computers and things. And it's nice to have, all these ways of connecting and discovering new things. But I do feel like sometimes maybe the more busier places online, it can kind of be hard to focus on one thing at a time. So my hope is that with the app, it's like if you just want a moment, I have like a word of the day in there. I have a journal prompt in there. I do an art piece every day, a poem every day, just something that you can just focus on just for that moment if you want to.
Lovely. And then the book, How Far You Have Come, releases into the world April 27th. So we're
Yes.
excited for that. And obviously that can be ordered through your website, morganharpernichols.com, right? Or through any book provider that works.
Yes, all of that works.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah, we'll put all those links in the show notes.
Yes. Well, we really appreciate the impact you have on the collective heartbeat of humanity, Morgan. Everyone that is touched by your work has an influence on those around them and so on. So there's a beautiful ripple effect that can't be measured. And what really matters most can't be measured very often. So thank you for reminding people that they are not alone. This is needed now more than ever. And thank you for being a bringer of light and hope. I think your dad said it perfectly when you were a child. God created you to create. And he said, I can see, referring to the creation he was looking at, this is coming from your heart. So he saw it and felt it then. And I think he summed it up perfectly.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel so bad because I feel like I'm giving so much silence on a podcast.
No, please. There's
Morgan,
beauty in the
say something.
silence.
But I'm just really taking it in. I genuinely am. So thank you. Thank you so much for just, again, reflecting my own heart back to me. That's what those words were for me. So thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you, Morgan.
Thank you. Thank you to our entire team behind the scenes at Glo. I'm so grateful for your care and commitment to serving our members around the world. Thank you to our teachers for so beautifully sharing your gifts and talents. I'm also grateful to our lovely community of Glo members. You've supported us since 2008, and because of you, we get to continue to do the work we love. It's the combined support of our team, our teachers, and our community that grants me the privilege to continue to bring you the Glo podcast. Thank you to Lee Schneider, our Red Cub agency, for production support. And the beautiful music you're hearing now is by Carrie Rodriguez and her husband, Luke Jacobs. And remember, take care of yourself because our world needs you. Thank you for coming on this journey with me. You can find the Glo podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or glo.com/podcast, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. I'm Derek Mills.